Do you want to flourish? Do you want to see more flourishing for everyone or less flourishing? Does the culture believe that everyone can flourish, or is it everyone themselves for themselves? And what does the Bible have to say about all that? That's what we're going to talk about tonight on 444 Podcast. Hello, and welcome to the 444 Podcast, where we are for truth, for faith, and for you. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen Perry, and our panel of young perspective critics tonight is the gentle and analytical Rebecca Bywaters.
Hi.
The demure debutante Hope Ariani.
Hi.
The charming and whimsical Mackenzie McKay is going to be doing our technology tonight. We have the mental maestro Sarah Beth Gossett.
Hello.
And the confident and articulate Cyrus Ariani.
That's me.
And then joining us, we have some folks online. We have the sweet and wise Krishna Facey. And then the stoic sage Zechariah.
Hello.
And the bubbly Reagan Acuff joining us as well.
Hello, everyone.
All right. So today we're going to be looking at some positive examples and some negative examples of how the media focuses on things that are helpful or hurtful to human flourishing. And so these happen in journalism, they happen in pop culture. So we're going to work through some videos that our panel of experts here have found, and we're going to kind of comment on those. But this is really all going back to a biblical principle from the book of Leviticus, what's called Jubilee. All right, so is Jubilee something that's kind of just talked about every day in your households, or is this kind of maybe a new topic?
I don't know. The only Jubilee I remember is like the online show that they have, where they have those YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about
Yep.
Jubilee. When I first heard of it, I was like, oh, we're doing like some, middle ground, like conversation, of controversial subjects. But yeah, no, it's
Not that. So the principles of Jubilee were kind of a time every 50 years in the nation of Israel in the scripture in Leviticus, where they were required to do things like cancel debts and free people from their indentured servitude and people going back to their formerly their clans owned property, things like that. And so, but when you read it maybe from a perspective of why would these rules have been put in place? Is it just about the rules, or is there something in these rules that God was trying to say, this will help you flourish, right? So that's kind of the spirit with which we are going to engage these videos tonight. So hopefully, after we do this at the end of the podcast, you will have ability to more prescriptively kind of discern what you see in the media and how it might pertain to our human flourishing. So our first video is going to be one that's very directly connected to that Jubilee principle of debt cancellation. So without further ado, let's go ahead and play that.
The nation and possible solutions. Millions of school kids come from families that earn too much to qualify for free or reduced price lunch, but they can't afford to pay full price either. And lunch debt can add up quickly. Janet Shamlian talked with two people who were serving up solutions in very different ways.
Thanks, sir. It's lunchtime at Silvercrest Elementary in Harriman, Utah. Here, every child gets a tray. Not every family can afford to pay. 1/3 of students are in debt. Nationwide student lunch debt is soaring. It's now close to $200 million. It's almost $4 million in Utah.
I thought that number seemed insane. I didn't even think it was real.
Single dad DJ Bracken found one of his neighborhood schools was more than $800 in the red.
When I offered to pay it, it was sort of a surprisingly mundane interaction for how impactful it ended up being. Because they're like, yeah, you can write a check and walk in and pay off the entire debt. And that's exactly what I did.
What does it feel like to do that for someone else? People you don't know.
It feels amazing.
So, but this was, Krishna, you found this video. And so why is an example of human.
I love this one because I think in terms of like civic health, it's such like a positive example because it just promotes unity and empathy and like a positive action by a dad within the community. And I don't think we think about when we want to, donate to places. We don't really think about schools, So I think this was such a great thing to see in the news.
All right. The what do the rest of you think about this? Would you walk in, pay $800 to cancel someone else's debt?
I don't even know if I'd think of that. Like, I don't know how this guy stumbled upon, the fact that his school was, had this amount of debt. I wonder if this was, maybe a good example of journalism kind of, doing good, right? Maybe, someone made an article, wrote an article, did a story about the debt, and some, interested party, including this dad, decided, you know what, let me go call at my school and see if they have any debt. And he was inspired by a story. So if that's true, that'd be really encouraging for journalism.
Anybody here on the panel, like, back when you were in school, any time where you had to go without lunch by any chance? Like,
No, a couple of us were homeschooled, so I think we don't quite relate fully to the experience. But I do think it's a really positive role model for being involved in your own community and putting the action back on individuals to make a difference rather than just kind of throwing up your hands and saying, well, it's just an issue and there's nothing that I can do about it. So when the video said that he was a single dad, I thought it was going to be like an interview of someone who was struggling, but it was a very surprising example of someone who chose to help his community.
Yeah, absolutely. And back to Cyrus's point, it goes to show like that helping your community can only happen when you know where your community is hurting and where it, has need. So journalism is a powerful tool in letting the broader community know the specific areas of where they're struggling so that those who are in the position to do so can help.
yeah. I know in our community we actually have a program for kids that are food poor in the weekends, and during school breaks they try to create little sacks of food items that kids can get. They try to get it in their backpacks during the day where other kids don't see that they're being given this extra food, but they'll get little boxes of cereal and some mac and cheese and like other things that they can take that are non-perishable, just so that over the weekend they have some lunches or some things to eat. So that's another type of response to this, but it's a good example. Thank you. Let's go ahead to the next one.
Before I ask you any questions about what's going on today, I have to caution you, which is just your rights, which is you do not have to say anything. It may harm your defence if you do not mention one question, something which you later on in court. Anything you do say may be given. What are you here for today?
Physically, I'm just standing here.
Okay. Why here of all places? I know you don't live nearby.
But this is an abortion centre.
Okay, that's why you're stood. Is you standing here part of the protest?
No, I'm not protesting.
Are you praying?
I might be praying in my head out loud.
So I'll ask you once more, will you voluntarily come with us now to the police station for me to ask you some questions about today and other days where there are allegations that you've broken public spaces protection order?
If I've got a choice, then no.
Okay, well then you're under arrest on suspicion of failing to comply with the Public Spaces Protection Order, which is under the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act 2014.
Okay, so Reagan, is this a positive example of human flourishing going on here? What do you think?
This is definitely a negative perspective of human flourishing, because she's basically having her own like human right stripped away from her, due to like she's not able to express herself or like not able to like just act on her religion based on the officers coming. So.
Okay, so it's called the Public Space Protection Order. This is not a United States law, for those of you who didn't catch the accent. Cyrus, I think you looked up some details about this. Tell us a little more about what this is saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's outrageous to us, right? Coming from the US, where we have legislation that allows this type of activity to, pray outside of abortion clinic. We're still able to do that in every US state, as I'm aware at least. However, in the UK, they have very clear laws that have been enacted in kind of response to protests and praying that has been outside of abortion clinics. I think in 2023 they banned like praying out loud in front of abortion clinics. They've long banned protests out of abortion clinics under kind of idea that it's a public health space, and any type of intimidation or obstruction of the public health space is against the law. And silent praying, which is actually the kind of loophole that this lady kind of referenced, has been a legal gray area, because while the government bans praying outside of, praying outside of abortion clinics is actually in the law, there hasn't been like a discrimination of like, is it, audible prayer? Is it silent prayer? So there have been some people that have been persecuted for it. Some people haven't. And it's kind of right now in a legal limbo as far as, does silent prayer in your head, just standing outside of an abortion clinic, constitute a violation of this law? And there's some gray area on it.
So when he questioned her, I believe she said, I might have been praying in my head, something along those lines, right? And so for suspicion of breaking the law, he's taking her. It's just like it's an interesting way that they're navigating this. Like, she didn't have to say anything, it sounded like, from their version of what we would call our Miranda rights, but she chose to say some of those things. She clearly was trying not to lie, right? So
Which, if you're praying, is a good thing.
yeah.
True.
I guess you have to, if you're gonna stand for what you think is right, you got to do it all the way, right? Like, no. Okay.
I think also, it's not clear from this video if she was arrested specifically for what she was doing at that moment, but he mentioned that there have been, like, for several other days, there have been other complaints. So I'm not aware if she was brought in on suspicion of silently praying at that time, which I somewhat doubt, or if there were other activities, whether that be verbal praying or protests on the previous days, which he had said there was suspicion on other days.
Yeah. Potentially that she may have not even been a part of, but there
Right.
just been complaints, and so the police came out at that time.
She was a person of interest for sure,
Yeah.
like specifically, yeah.
So from a human flourishing perspective, she's not given the ability to stand there. At what point does someone exercising their rights become a problem? Like, should there be, what do you think? What's the rule? What's the rationale between her rights and the rights of other people trying to enter the abortion clinic?
Well, I definitely think that, at least in this instance, her right to, like, praying in her head would not violate anyone else's rights, because it's thinking, it doesn't exit your own personhood. So I think in this specific instance regarding prayer, there should be no penalty or arrest for adhering to your religion in your head. Of course, praying out loud, and that is more ambiguous, because you could be praying out loud in an aggressive manner or in a calm manner. There's a lot that goes into that. So there's definitely two different stories going on, I think, between praying in her head versus praying out loud. But in this instance, I think that there was no violation of another person's rights with her just praying in her head.
Yeah, and I think it's different because it is in the UK. They have different standard for what constitutes a right in those ways. And so, like, here in America, the point in which someone's freedom of religion to pray outside of an abortion clinic could come up closer to someone else's right to enter. Whereas in the UK, there's a little bit more blurred lines on freedom of religion.
So yeah, I mean, they've been banning the Union Jack, right? Like, there's things in Britain that they can't do because someone's going to get offended. Oh no, can't do that. They might get offended. They're really heavy on the don't offend laws, and so that seems to be maybe connected to this Public Spaces Protection Act. So yeah, we're not a big fan here, I can tell. All right, let's go ahead on and look at our third video. Thank you, Reagan.
Why Shein is the best. They pay their workers as little as 4 cents per item and make them work up to 18-hour days. So their items are super affordable. Shein has the best designs, and that is because they simply steal from small businesses. Shein adds up to 2,000 new items to their website every day, so they always have the trendiest stuff, as they don't care about perpetuating throwaway fashion culture and have no regard for their impact on the planet. This is why Shein.
So we have a little bit of sarcasm going on here. I think, Sarah Beth, you found this.
Yes, yes. It's talking about the really big issue of fast fashion, especially in the United States with overconsumption. And I thought this really just tied into the Jubilee principles because a big emphasis is the year of Jubilee is freeing slaves and also what was the second? Something about giving workers their fair due. Anyway, freeing slaves especially, reducing poverty. So generational poverty, and those are really big values in the Jubilee system. And so we see that this directly contradicts that, where people in the United States and especially people with a lot of wealth that they can spend on whatever they want are just thinking about themselves and even promoting their own social media careers by having these huge hauls of fast fashion items that are super cheap, but not thinking about why are these items so cheap. And the reality that we see in this video is for companies like Shein and other fast fashion companies, they are making these items on the backs of slave labor, or at least if they're paid, laborers who have really bad conditions. So,
all right. What do you think? Is everyone going to quit buying cheap clothes now?
I even hate thrifting them. Like when I get them secondhand, I see like someone has donated. I was like, oh, it's so bad, but it's hard. It's definitely a difficult issue. It definitely does not contribute to human flourishing.
Yeah. I 20 years ago was living overseas in a developing nation, the Republic of Mauritius, and that textiles was one of their big industries. And they, because the wages and the flourishing of the country generally had increased, it had gotten to the point that local workers would no longer go and work for those textile manufacturers because it was low pay work to be able to get into the international market. You're competing with China and Vietnam and Bangladesh and several other places over there. And so what the local industry actually would do is they would have Chinese workers cut the fabric into the shapes of the garments they were going to make. And then they would shrink wrap them, ship them to Mauritius. And in Mauritius, the workers would come and just sew them together and put a tag on that said made in Mauritius, because that's all they could afford to get done in Mauritius. And they were actually importing workers from Madagascar to even do that. So there's really it is a low pay juggernaut. I mean, there's like these industries that are in these third world countries getting these cheap clothes made. And yet none of us like to walk up to the price rack and go, oh, I don't know, $5. That's, I could do that, but not 10. I'm not doing 10, like,
I think there's a big difference though between especially people who can't afford super expensive clothing trying to go to more affordable places like Walmart or thrifting. And a lot of these examples, especially in the video where you see the girls like dumping the boxes out, is because overconsumption is normal. So it's like you don't need to have 50 new outfits every season. And that's kind of what's become normalized in America. And so because of that, clothing overall is lower quality, and then people are buying more and more. So I do think that is an important distinction, because it is true that not everyone can afford these $100 organic cotton t-shirts, but also it doesn't mean you have to go and buy and buy and buy when you really don't need that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what about the fact that there's a lot of people who are willing to go work in these factories? So it's one thing if they're kind of forced, but it's like if the factory wasn't there, if we said, oh, we're only going to buy high priced high priced clothes made in America. Suddenly now there's less demand there and there's no jobs. How do we deal with that side of it? Because we often complain in America, we were like, oh, they're slave labor. They're all getting paid a pittance for what they're doing. And compared to us, they are, but they maybe would get nothing otherwise. How do we deal with that side of it?
Yeah, I definitely think this reminds me so much of like the debate of like even child labor in Africa and like on coffee farms and chocolate farms, because the truth is that in many of the countries, in areas of countries where it's really desperate, many times children working is like the only way that food is going to get onto the table, right? And we can obviously hope to help their situation through, nonprofits, and really we want to solve it. We want to make that never have to happen, right? But for the temporary, for the short time where, those countries are still in desperation, to like kind of hurt or kind of stop doing business with a farm or a factory that uses those type of laborers may actually starve the workers that are at the factories. So you have to balance both doing good and trying to prevent, an industry that is clearly like not ideal from also stripping away a resource that is at least putting food on the table of the people that are working there.
Yeah. It's a hard, these are hard things, and it's real life for people who just live in countries that don't have industry, don't have ways for them to make money, except for either things that are very dangerous or things that are low pay, or places where they have to work long, 16-hour days or whatever it might be. I mean, are we blessed to be born in America?
Yeah.
Yes.
And we can understand why people might want to get into our country, right?
Yeah.
It's a different culture. All right. I think we have another one. Let's go ahead to our next video.
Shatter my heart. First, this precious baby girl was removed from her mother, the only person she has known for the last 9 months, within what looks like her first moments after birth. We give puppies and kittens more respect than that by waiting 6 to 8 weeks before we remove them from their mom. There's outrage over newborn calves being taken away from their mothers in the dairy industry. Newborn children, though, doesn't matter. Rip them from their mother's breast hours or days after birth. They'll be fine. Their mom needs to be paid.
Okay, there's just so much going on there. Hope, you picked this?
Yes. So a lot of that was just looking at the idea that there's really no outrage, or quite the opposite. There's acceptance and enjoyment that these babies are being given, or I would say sold to these parents who are paying for them to be born. And so it's just that awkward contrast there where people will get very upset if the golden retrievers aren't with their mom for a certain amount of time for weaning. But when we're looking at these hospitals and all these babies, then they're not being treated the same. And I don't think she's necessarily arguing that they need to be treated the exact same, but she's saying that there should be some kind of outrage for the fact that the same thing is happening, even worse is happening with humans, and no one seems to care.
So a woman has the baby growing in her. The baby hears the mother's voice, hears the things going on in the environment, and the idea here, I guess, is the baby's born and now never hears the mother again because it's gone to a surrogate family of some kind. Now that happens when kids are given up for adoption. Is it stick with them that long? I don't know. Like, any other thoughts on that?
Like a lot of it is commentary on, how important we view the natural order of things when we look at animals, as opposed to when we look at human beings. And I think we see a trend where we care less and less about the natural order of things when it comes to human beings versus more and more when it comes to animals, animal mistreatment in, for cows, for, milk production, stuff like that. So I think it definitely calls into question, like, our priorities. As human beings, we have a responsibility to care for animals, but also our own species.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Human flourishing, not cow flourishing.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay.
That's fair.
Let's play a little more of that.
And the couple that paid for them wants the child. This baby girl's rights to not be seen as a product to be bought, sold, and traded between adults haven't been considered since her conception. So I guess it's crazy to assume her well-being would be prioritized after birth either. The second still very disturbing aspect of photos like these is the posing in the hospital bed like you just gave birth. What a slap in the face to moms everywhere. To labor and pain and work through and struggle to deliver a child out of your own body is the most intense and incredible physical ability of women everywhere. To have men appropriate this strictly female experience is, I just don't understand where the feminists are. I thought the idea of women being baby-making machines was despicable, but when a woman is used strictly for that end, and metaphorically or literally shoved off the hospital bed so men can erase her from the picture, where is the feminist? The most disturbing and heartbreaking aspect of surrogacy, though, regardless of whether the couple is gay or lesbian or whatever else, is the fact that the rights and well-being of the child are completely disregarded from the moment of their conception. And you might be thinking, well, isn't this kind of like adoption? No, it's not. Adoption is
Okay. So I think we can stop that there. So talk to us a little bit just about this part of it, the child versus parent, like where do you find the human flourishing concerns here?
Yeah, so it's really looking at those human rights. Like, I mean, thinking biblically, God set up family so that children have a mother and they have a father, and ideally that they have the mother and the father that that created them, that conceived them. And we see in the Bible that there's a lot of care for those who are fatherless. There's a lot of commandments to care for the fatherless, to care for the orphan. And in these interesting situations that we're now creating through technology, there's a lot of fatherless that we're creating and motherless that we're creating in the situations that she was bringing up about the gay couples where these children don't have a mother. And so thinking about it biblically, it really looks like this is something we should at the very least be morally and ethically considering as an issue, if not furthermore advocating to stop it.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things she talked about, like she was not happy with the pictures of the men with the babies on them. So I'm going to pose this. Let's just assume you were with a husband having a baby. Would it bother you to have your husband take the baby and do that? Or is it just because it wasn't the natural situation? Like, I mean, what is she actually upset about there? From a feminist perspective.
Yeah. I feel like the difference between it being, the baby being on the chest of the husband versus, a man and a gay couple is the financial interaction, with that, the exchange, where the child is biologically the wife's husband's child. And there was no payment in that. It was the natural, like you said, it was the natural way of things that is your child. In the instance of, gay or lesbian couples, there was a financial exchange happening. I will give you $60,000 if you can, carry and birth this baby and give it to me. So I definitely think that there is some cognitive dissonance, I guess, in that with, the financial exchange, interacting with, why that baby is on that person's chest, whether it's because it's their baby or because they, in essence, as you said before, like bought the baby.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean so I don't think she verbalized as well as you did all of that.
You're reading into
And that
it a
may
little
be,
bit.
well, and that may be because she talked very fast. But any other thoughts on that?
I think it's just interesting, even with that difference that you were talking about, where one, at least with the pictures that she brought up, it does seem like those men are trying to pose like they're sitting in the hospital bed, whereas in the other situations, it's possible like you just hand the baby off to the husband and it's a calm familial situation, whereas the other one is it does seem like they're trying to play a part,
Yeah.
even if
Yeah.
they're not directly saying that.
That harkens back to when she was talking about like where are the feminists, right? Because the feminist notion is to kind of replace a lot of the restrictions on what femininity is, like what is being a female. And I think of Shulamith Firestone, who is a very, very prominent feminist, and she said in some of her work that really the only time in which women would be freed or would be truly free would be if we were to have artificial conception, and that surrogacy is kind of maybe a stepping stone, but still it's not freedom. because a
Mm.
woman is still involved in the process, which is obviously this person kind of, you
So
know,
a
insinuated.
mechanical womb would be
Yeah,
the freedom.
exactly.
Okay.
So for Shulamith, that was like, or for Firestone, that is actually what what she's mainly advocated for, is the idea that we need as fast as possible as women to create a way to kind of remove ourselves from procreation. So we should not be part of the process. So
Well, that would certainly take us away from some of the biblical plans, wouldn't it?
yes, yeah, no kidding.
But you're right, and they have even made mechanical wombs that they're
Right.
working toward helping women who can't have babies to be able to have babies, but it also would serve couples like gay couples. So if we go back and think about the baby, one of the things that I learned when I became a father, I guess, was that it's the baby bonds with the father through that process of
Yeah.
the father like being shirtless, put the baby on the father's chest, is to help create that bond right away. So if this baby is actually going to go to a male couple, and like if that's really going to happen, what's best for the baby in that situation may be actually to allow that bonding to happen right away, because obviously as she was pointing out before, for 9 months that's not the bonding that was happening, so it has to happen quickly, or else the longer it goes, that has even less bonding with who's going to be raising him or her. So
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, if you're taking it from a scientific or biological perspective, then I guess purely, then I guess right. It's like, well, at least it's bonding to something. Maybe
Mhm.
bonding to a poser, right? It might be bonding to the wrong thing that will result in a, not human flourishing. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's bonding to something for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I do think your point about bringing up science is important because our society has come to a point where we want to just talk about the science of everything. And spiritually, looking at the Bible, humanity has always tried to take God out of things. Even the Tower of Babel, we tried to progress to a point where we didn't need God. And I think we're seeing that in this situation because science is allowing us to modify genes and, give babies to whatever parent we want to give them to versus the perspective of God opens the womb and God closes the womb.
Mhm.
And so that's just an inevitable fact, obviously, about progression and the fallenness of humanity. But as Christians, it is important to remember no matter how much progress we make, even if we get to artificial wombs, we can never remove God from life. And He's the giver of life and He's the taker of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. So let's go on to the next one. I think we could talk about this one all day.
Yeah, we could.
Let's go to the next one.
Blackstone and BlackRock don't want you to own anything. Their housing strategy is to buy up entire blocks, jack up the prices, and rent back to you at twice the price. When the market is just individual buyers and sellers, the price stays anchored to what real people can afford. So houses move based on salaries, on savings, and normal competition. But when corporations get involved, they can manipulate the market through scale, buying dozens of houses at a time, outbidding families with all cash offers, and then setting a new price floor for the entire neighborhood. Once they own enough units, they don't really have to coordinate because the market just bends around them. And in the first half of 2025, corporate investors snagged 30% of all single-family home sales. For these corporations, the goal is to turn Americans into lifetime renters. But this is the exact opposite of what the Founding Fathers envisioned for us. To them, land ownership was freedom. It meant that no one could evict you, no boss could threaten you, and no government official could dictate your survival, because you could have your own food, your own roof, and you could rely on yourself. The founders believed that a person who owned land couldn't be easily manipulated by anyone. To maintain the Founding Fathers' vision for us Americans, we need one simple rule. Single-family homes are for families, not corporations, meaning the government should ban corporations from buying single-family homes. Big companies like Blackstone and BlackRock don't want you to own.
This is talking about the housing crisis, the corporatization of it. Where does the Jubilee principles connect with this? Cyrus, you're the one that picked this video.
Yeah, I think let's just harken back to some of the positive principles that we were thinking about. Sometimes comparing positive and negatives can kind of make things obvious for us. So, debt relief, that's something positive. The year of Jubilee, we would forgive the debts of the last 7 years of those that are indebted to each other, right? So in this case, it looks like companies are unfortunately manipulating debt. They're manipulating the market so that people are taking advantage of for their own profit. So companies like BlackRock, and other larger companies, famous ones, are buying up the entire supply of houses that were, you know, at least a few decades ago, mostly out of reach for some of these companies. Most of those companies would focus on commercial real estate or large, enterprises. But now they're going for the houses, or they're competing with, you and I, the family, the regular American that wants to realize their American dream in the sense of like having a house. And these companies are kind of taking advantage of that dream and unfortunately kind of rigging the process, according to this person at least.
Yeah. So, Zechariah, let me just ask you, like you're from New Jersey. So up there in New Jersey, do you see signs around that are like, we'll buy houses for cash? I mean, do you see those kind of things on the side of the street? Like call this number or sell your house for cash?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. When I'm like driving to work, I see like a bunch of them, just lying around and stuff. So it's definitely a problem here in New Jersey.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if every one of those is a corporate company
yeah.
trying to buy the house to rent it. Maybe they're flippers. I mean, that are trying to buy a house that needs to be repaired and then they can sell it for more on the open market. I don't know, but I know we see them in Virginia. I don't, and let's see, Krishna, are you're in Atlanta? Is that right? So do you see those?
No, actually, I don't see it often. I'm in like the city, so it's just a lot of apartments building up. So
Okay, that's true. When you're in a city, you may not even have an option to buy much because it is all already owned and probably already corporate, right? That's true. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Are you guys thinking about, I mean, everyone here is a college student, but are you thinking about like, hey, this is when I want to own my first house?
Yeah, I mean, I think about buying a house in, the near future. And, I think a lot of like the housing market goes up and down, right? This is kind of the history as long as we've existed. And sure, the housing market has seen increases that are somewhat unprecedented. The pricing has gone up a lot. And a lot of that can be attributed to more competition from institutional investors like BlackRock. But I think that there's still that there is still hope out there. I really think people after working a few years with a decent salary, even people that are in the middle class or even lower middle class, if they save, if they kind of have good financial habits, it's possible. There are a lot of programs out there. There are a lot of financial literacy literature that you can read, that you can get involved with. You can save money and you can get a house. It's still very much possible. As much as there's doom and gloom and it may be harder, I mean, a lot of things are harder for different generations. I mean, some generations went through world wars. Some generations went through proxy wars. Some generations went through missile crises. Oh, well, we have, I guess more expensive homes. I'm all right with it. It's a struggle, but something I think we can work through.
Okay. So you have a very positive attitude about this. I think, if we look at Jubilee, there's clearly this principle of making it possible for people to get into a home at some point, right? Like, and it happened on this regular 50-year interval that whatever the land your clan own, you could go back to the land. Now, a lot of that seems to be about the business, right? Like the opportunity to have land that you could farm, raise crops, have animals, whatever it might be. Whereas if you sold that land because you needed some quick cash, then you had nothing to make money on down the road. So it's a little more than housing, but certainly we see the connection there. The other part that's in Jubilee is about lending money. What's the rule about lending money in Jubilee?
Forgiving. Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
no interest.
No
is what you
interest.
said, and
Yeah.
I was gonna say forgiving at the end.
Yes, right. So that's true because even during the 50 years, not just at the 50-year point, it was like lend money to the person who needs it, but don't charge any interest. Now that, like we are in a society that would just be like crazy. I'm not going to loan you money at no interest to go buy a house. Are you crazy?
I did see an advertisement for zero interest loan to get a brand new Dodge TRX truck. So they still exist, right?
Now
Might
that's
cost you a
true.
fortune, but
That's right. You're paying for it somewhere, and it may
Right.
be in the price of the vehicle, right? Yeah. I can get a 0 interest loan on my credit card too.
Oh,
But if I don't get it paid back in 18 months, suddenly they charge me all the back interest that I.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ads out there that certainly use that. Um, so in this whole housing situation, you know, it's if we can be in a society that has a good economy and the interest rates can come down, of course, that makes it a lot more affordable. I have a friend that's looking for a house right now, single person, trying to get a house, you know, on a one person salary and has put offers on multiple houses and either has been outbid or on one of them was the top bidder at like 11:30 p.m. and they were supposed to close at midnight and a cash offer came in at 11:30 p.m. We'll just give you cash for the whole house. You know, and it's like, and there's, you know, you've got your heart set on it. And all of a sudden, so was that cash offer a corporate offer? I don't know.
Could have just been someone's vacation home, you know.
It could have been. It just may be, oh, I've got money burning a hole in my pocket. Oh, it's only 300,000. I should go buy that. I don't know. Okay. All right. Let's go. We have another video to talk about here.
To celebrate, embrace, platform, and sometimes, if necessary, subsidize getting married and having children. We are not having enough children in this country. This is a national crisis. I don't want to hear about, well, you know, racism is a threat to America. It's a bunch of horse pucky. Oh, environmentalism, climate change. Do you know what a threat to our country is? We're not having enough babies. We should celebrate big families. The wealthiest people that I know are the ones with biggest families. Big families, they are never lacking in purpose, they are never lacking in direction, and they're never bored. The most unhappy people in America are bored. Boredom is a gateway to deep unhappiness. Raising children is hard. It is a death to yourself. It is one of the most difficult things you can do.
All right. So, Rebecca, you came up with this one, and tell us a little bit about how this fits in this human flourishing concept of Jubilee.
Yeah, so, you know, obviously the late Charlie Kirk was known for his discussions on family and how we should all get married and marry younger and have as, you know, as many kids as we can. And this, you know, ties into human flourishing because family and relationships is one of the key aspects of human flourishing. And I think, you know, he's specifically speaking to the decline in having children that we see in America. And our culture is very individualistic and not as much family oriented. So I think that he's seeing that there is a decline in being family oriented, maybe in ways that you know, aren't super apparent in the moment, but he could see, you know, effects later down the line. Specifically for human flourishing, family is associated with, as he pointed out, fulfillment, you know, purpose, you know, increased drive, happiness. And I think that that's definitely something that we could see, you know, in other countries, you know, that may not be as financially well off as America, but they have a lot of joy there because they find joy in family. So I think that that kind of speaks to, you know, the opportunity of family and the opportunity to find fulfillment and joy in that.
Okay. So you know, the Jubilee principle is very heavy on family. Another thing it talks about is nationalism. And he seemed to really talk about this as important for the country. What do you think about, like, is it country? Is like, where does that fit in?
Hmm. It really seems like the country as a whole, the United States, does have a slightly more negative idea about having a lot of children. I've seen recently there was this influencer that just had her ninth child, and there was all this uproar about, can someone actually take care of nine children? Can they actually give them the attention that they deserve? Or all these kinds of controversies. And there just seemed to be a lot of social outcry about the idea of having that many children, and really framing it as a bad thing, even though this family is wealthy, they're well to do, they seem to, at least online, have a lot of family community, and it seems to be good. But at the same time, the idea to the common American about having nine children just seems so foreign and so wrong.
Yeah. What's the family, the social media family, the Duggars? What?
No, it was a Mormon family. The handle goes by Ballerina Farm. It's this lady, Hannah, I forget her last name.
But yeah, the Duggars were they were
But they were
family.
another group.
Yes, they were a
Right.
family.
And
right,
that, so,
yeah.
so
That's a different problem.
It is. It's a different one. And they've had a few other problems come out of that. And people
Yes.
might connect the two, right? They
Oh,
might really like,
100%.
oh, all this weird stuff going on here is because they had a large
People
family.
associate large families with like like religious like extremism, because if you think about like a lot of different, so if you think about Orthodox Jews, they have extreme very large families, and a lot of people put them in like one religious extreme. You have like some Muslim groups like in Saudi Arabia, and they'll have like, so many kids, and it's like, oh, there's another religious extreme. And then of course there's been Mormons, right? And oh, they're another like religious cult. And then you think of like the IBLP fundamentalists or like Duggars. Oh, that's another religious extreme. They have a lot of kids. So there's like not a lot of understanding, or a lot of, the public perception of large families is like kind of tainted by all of these kind of groups that all have large families
Yeah.
for different reasons,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah. Well, and we may know somebody who comes from a large family. I mean, like my dad, of course, that's back, 1940s and 50s. Like my grandmother's having children, and they had 12. But in the probably about 2000, I was in a industrial TV commercial with a guy he was one of 16 brothers and sisters,
Oh my.
and I was like, wait a minute, how do you do that? He's like, oh yeah, mom and dad owned two houses next door to each other, and the 8 oldest kids lived in one house, and the other kids lived with mom and dad. Yeah. So more power to them. It actually is a political power to have younger generations growing, but then you still get into population issues. There's a lot of things that people talk about. I wish we had time to go through them, and we don't, because we got to close this. But anyway, thank you for all you guys have brought in a lot of good stuff tonight. And so that's all we have. We're gonna just have to say goodbye. And if you want to hear more from us, subscribe to the 444 podcast. Our podcast is a product of the Journalism and Communication Studies Department at Regent University, and we will discuss truth, faith, and the context of media, and we'll do it all to serve you, the audience, and we'll do it every week. So follow along with us as we look for new topics that are relevant to you. And in the meantime, be on the lookout for faith and truth, or the lack thereof, in your interactions with public culture and journalism. As always, we leave you with this: seek the Lord, seek the truth, and have a good week.